Your son failed every test aliens mocked, until his blood activated the ancient weapon. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. The Galactic Academy stood as a monument to 1,000 civilizations, its crystal spires reaching toward the stars like frozen lightning. Within its halls, young beings from across known space learned the ways of technology, diplomacy, and war. And in the farthest corner of the remedial wing, slouched a chair too small for his human frame, sat Lucas Barrett, the only human student in the entire institution, and, by all accounts, the worst student the Academy had ever seen. Lucas stared at the holographic display floating before him, the symbols and equations swimming in his vision like angry fish. Around him, his classmates worked in focus silence, their various appendages dancing across their own displays with practiced ease. To his left, a Morvani student with 6 tentacles completed a complex quantum calculation in seconds. To his right, a crystalline shellker hummed softly as data streamed directly into its consciousness, and Lucas sat there, unable to even identify which button would start the test. Proctor, a tall Vaxian named instructors, walked between the rows of students, his 4 eyes scanning their progress. When he reached Lucas, he paused, his mandibles clicking in what Lucas had learned was the Vaxian equivalent of a disappointed sigh. Then, instructors said, his voice carrying just loud enough for nearby students to hear, your performance continues to be unprecedented in its inadequacy. Lucas felt his face flush red, but he kept his eyes on the screen. He had heard variations of this assessment every day. For the past 2 years, the whispers had started on his first day and had only grown louder with each failed test, each misunderstood concept, each demonstration of what the other species considered to be willful incompetence. "I am trying, sir," Lucas replied quietly. "Trying," Instructor Fellows repeated, his mandibles spreading in what might have been amusement. "Yes, I suppose even that must require tremendous effort for your kind. Tell me, Barrett, how did your species ever achieve space travel? Did you stumble into it by accident? Did you simply push random buttons until something worked?" Few students chittered with laughter. Lucas clenched his jaw and said nothing. It was not the first time he had heard such jokes, and it would not be the last. The test continued, and Lucas did his best, which was to say he failed spectacularly. By the time the session ended, he had completed perhaps 20% of the examination, and of that he was certain at least half was incorrect. As the other students filed out, chatting easily about their performance, Lucas remained seated, staring at his abysmal score displayed in harsh red light. "Your father would be disappointed," a voice said from behind him. Lucas turned to find caller, a young Trollian female with iridescent scales and 3 eyes that gleamed with barely concealed contempt. She had made it her personal mission to remind Lucas of his father's legacy at every opportunity. "My father has nothing to do with this," Lucas said, standing and gathering his materials. Caller laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a storm. "Nothing to do with this. Your father is Marcus Barrett, the human who helped broker the treaty that brought Earth into the Galactic Council. He is respected across 100 worlds. And you are this," she gestured at his failed test score still glowing in the How humiliating it must be for him to have produced such a defective offspring. Lucas felt the familiar weight of those words settle on his shoulders. She was not wrong. His father was indeed Marcus Barrett, diplomat, war hero, and one of the most respected humans in the galaxy, and Lucas was his son, the boy who could not pass a basic academy exam, who struggled with concepts that children of other species mastered before they could walk. Are you quite finished? Lucas asked, his voice flat. Caloris smiled, showing rows of crystalline teeth. I suppose I am. After all, there is no sport in mocking someone who so thoroughly mocks themselves. She turned and left, her footsteps echoing in the empty classroom. Lucas stood alone in the silence, then slowly made his way toward the dormitories. The academy was beautiful in the evening light, with 3 moons rising over the distant mountains and bioluminescent plants beginning to glow along the pathways. It should have been inspiring. Instead, it just made Lucas feel more isolated, more out of place. He reached his quarters, a small room he had to himself because no other student wanted to share with the human failure, and collapsed onto his bed. The day's humiliations played through his mind on an endless loop. He thought about calling his father, but what would he say? That he had failed another test, that the other students mocked him, that he was beginning to wonder if coming to the academy had been a terrible mistake. His communicator bust. Lucas glanced at it, expecting another message from his academic advisor about remedial tutoring. Instead, it was from the headmaster herself, Headmaster Valora of the Andraxian Collective. The message was brief: report to my office immediately. Lucas felt his stomach drop. In 2 years at the academy, he had never been summoned to the Headham's office. Students only went there for 2 reasons: exceptional achievement or expulsion. He knew which category he fell into. He made his way through the quiet corridors, past trophy cases displaying the achievements of legendary students, past murals depicting great moments in galactic history. Each step felt heavier than the last. The headmaster's office occupied the top floor of the central spire, a vast circular room with windows that looked out over the entire campus. Headmaster Valora stood with her back to the door, her elongated form silhouetted against the stars. She was Andraxian, a species known for their wisdom and their uncompromising standards. Without turning, she spoke. Lucas Barrett, your academic record is quite remarkable. Lucas swallowed hard. Yes, Headmaster, I know my performance has been unacceptable. Now Valora turned in. Lucas was struck as always by her eyes, entirely black-like, looking into deep space. Unacceptable. Your performance has been catastrophic. You rank last in every subject. You have failed 94% of all examinations. Your practical scores are so low that our systems initially flagged them as errors. I have been trying to improve, Lucas began, but Valora raised a slender hand. You have been trying? Yes, that much is evident. In fact, you study harder than almost any student here. I have reviewed the security recordings. You spend hours in the library every night. You work with tutors. You attend every extra session available, and yet you continue to fail. Why do you think that is? Lucas had asked himself that question 1,000 times. Because I am not smart enough. Because humans are not meant to be here. Because I am a disappointment to everyone who believed in me. Valora regarded him for a long moment. You believe you are deficient. It is what the tests show, Lucas replied. The tests, Valora said, walking slowly around her desk, show that you do not learn the way other species learn. They show that your mind processes information differently. But tell me, Lucas Barrett, do you know why your father recommended you for this academy? Lucas blinked, surprised. My father recommended me. I thought it was just because of his status. Valora's expression did not change, but something in her posture suggested amusement. Your father specifically requested that you be admitted despite the fact that you had no formal academic credentials. Do you know what he told me? He said that humans have a unique quality that other species often overlook, a quality that cannot be measured by tests or examinations. What quality? Lucas asked. Before Valora could answer, an alarm pierced the air, not the gentle chime of a fire drill or the brief pulse of a test, but a deep resonating wail that Lucas had only heard once before during emergency drills, the sound that meant the academy was under attack. The Laura moved to her console with surprising speed, her fingers dancing across holographic controls, her black eyes widened. Impossible. What is it? Lucas asked, moving closer. The Vorlith, Valora said, and her voice carried an emotion Lucas had never heard from her before. Fear. They have returned. Lucas felt his blood run cold. Every species in the galaxy knew about the Vorlith. They were the nightmare that parents used to frighten children into behaving. The story told around campfires on a 100 worlds, an ancient species older than any current civilization who had nearly conquered the entire galaxy before mysteriously vanishing 5,000 years ago. Their weapons had leveled planets, their ships had blotted out suns, and, according to legend, they had disappeared not because they were defeated, but because they chose to leave, promising to return when the galaxy was ready to be harvested. That is impossible, Lucas said. The Vorlith are extinct. They are a myth. Valora pulled up a display, and Lucas saw ships emerging from hyperspace around the academy, dozens of them, sleek and black, covered in symbols that hurt to look at. Ships that should not exist. Myth that is currently surrounding our planet, Valora said grimly. She pressed a series of commands. All students are being evacuated to the emergency shelters. You need to go now. But Lucas found he could not move. He stared at the ships on the display, at their impossible geometry and the way they seemed to distort space around them. Something about them called to him, a sensation he could not name but felt in his bones. The door to the office burst open and instructors rushed in, his mandibles clicking rapidly. Headmaster, the defense grid is not responding. None of our weapon systems are activating. It is as if they do not recognize the Vorlith ships as threats. Of course not, Valoris said. The Vorlith technology is the foundation upon which all modern systems are built. They seeded the galaxy with their knowledge before they left. Our weapons likely consider them to be allied vessels. Then we are defenseless, Fellow said. Not entirely, Valora replied. She turned to a section of her office that Lucas had always assumed was decorative, a wall covered in ancient symbols and what looked like crystallized metal. The Vault of Ancients. The academy was built on this site because of what lies beneath, weapons left behind by the Previous galactic civilization, the ones who fought the Vorlith to a standstill. I thought that was a legend, fellow. Said many things we thought were. Legends are proving to be quite real. Today, Valora replied. She placed her hand on the wall and the symbols began to glow, but there is a problem. The weapons are keyed to biological signatures. They require activation by blood from a species that carries the genetic marker of the ancient defenders. Have you tested the students, fellows? Asked every species represented at this academy. Has been tested, said none. Carry the marker. The ancient defenders are long extinct. She paused, then looked at Lucas with those fathomless black eyes. All except one species we never tested because until recently they were unknown to us. Lucas felt everyone's attention turned to him. You think humans might have the marker? Your species appeared on the galactic stage only 30 years ago, Valorous said, and yet human legends speak of ancient visitors, of gods who came from the stars, of knowledge gifted by beings from beyond. What if those were not legends? What if the ancient defenders visited your world and left something behind? That is absurd, Theo said. Humans are the least advanced species in the galaxy. They barely understand quantum mechanics. They cannot even pass basic academy examinations. To suggest that they might be the key to ancient super weapons is beyond ridiculous. And yet, Valora said calmly, we have no other options. She looked at Lucas. Are you willing to try? Lucas thought about all the failed tests, all the mockery, all the times he had been told he was not good enough. Here was a chance to actually contribute something, even if it was just to prove that humans were as useless as everyone believed. What do I need to do? He asked. Valora led him to the wall, then produced a small device that looked like a medical scanner. Place your hand here and this will take a blood sample. If you carry the marker, the weapons will recognize you. If not, the Vorlith will destroy the academy and likely this entire world before moving on to the rest of the galaxy. No pressure then, Lucas said, trying for humor. Despite his shaking hands, he placed his palm against the wall. The device pricked his finger, drawing a single drop of blood. For a moment nothing happened. Fellows clicked his mandibles in what Lucas recognized as disgust. As I said, absurd. Humans could not possibly be. He never finished the sentence. The drop of blood touched the crystallized metal, and the entire wall exploded into light. Not the gentle glow it had shown before, but a blazing radiance that filled the office and spilled out through the windows, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Lucas felt something surge through him, starting from his hand and spreading through his entire body, a sensation like electricity, but deeper, like something was waking up inside him that had been asleep for a very, very long time. The floor beneath them began to shake. The walls of the office became transparent, revealing the true structure of the building they had never seen. The academy was not built on the ancient site. The academy was built around it, encasing something vast and powerful that now responded to Lucas's blood. Impossible, fellows whispered. The readings, they are off the scale. The human, he is activating everything. How can this be? Velora stared at her. Displays her composure finally cracking. The ancients did not just visit Earth, she said. They built something there. They prepared humanity for this moment. Lucas Barrett, you are not a failure. you are a sleeper agent, coded at the genetic level, waiting for the return of the Vorlith. Lucas felt the presence of the weapons now, massive systems buried deep beneath the Academy, powered by technology that made current galactic science look like children playing with sticks, and they recognized him. More than that, they responded to him, waiting for his commands. Outside, the Vorlith ships began their attack. Lance beams of energy stabbed down from orbit, weapons that had destroyed civilizations. They struck the shields that now blazed around the Academy, shields that had not existed moments before and dissipated harmlessly. On Valor's display, a transmission came through from the Vorlith flagship. It spoke in a language that should have been incomprehensible, dead for 5,000 years, but Lucas understood every word. His body understood it, his blood understood it, because whatever the ancients had done to humanity, they had prepared them for this exact moment. The voice said, "You who have activated the Sentinel systems, you are recognized as inheritors of the compact. State your designation." Lucas found himself speaking, and the words came from somewhere deep inside, from memories that were not his own but belonged to his species. "I am Lucas Barrett of Earth, and I speak for humanity. We were chosen by the ancients to be guardians. In their absence, you are in violation of the treaty of 5,000 years. Depart now or face consequences." There was a long pause, then the Vorlith voice spoke again, and now it carried a note of what might have been respect. "The humans, the ancients spoke of you, the infant species, given the burden of our watch. We did not believe you would ever amount to anything. Your development has been so slow, your progress so minimal. You have only just achieved space travel. You barely understand the fundamental forces of the universe. How could you be the guardians we were warned of?" Lucas felt anger rising in him, but not just his own anger. It was the anger of humanity itself, the species that had clawed its way up from caves to stars, that had survived ice ages and plagues, and wars, that had looked at an impossible universe and decided to explore it anyway. "You mock us for being slow learners," Lucas said. "You judge us for failing your tests, but that is the point, is it not? The ancients did not choose humanity because we were already advanced. They chose us because we never give up, because we learn from every failure, because when the universe tells us we cannot do something, we find a way to do it anyway. They gave us the keys to these weapons, and they gave us 5,000 years to figure out how to use them, and now you have come to test whether we were worthy of that trust." The Vorlith ship did not respond immediately. Lucas could feel the weapon systems responding to his presence, ancient machines waking from their long sleep, rail guns that could punch through planetary shields, energy cannons that could ignite atmospheres, gravity wells that could crush ships like insects, and more, so much more. Weapons whose very purpose he could not yet comprehend, but which waited for his command. Instructors stared at Lucas as if seeing him for the first time. "All this time, we thought you were deficient," we mocked. "You called you a failure," said humans were inferior, but you were simply operating on a different level entirely. Lucas shook his head, though he did not take his attention from the Vorlith ships. "No, I did fail those tests. I am terrible at quantum mechanics and multi-dimensional geometry. I do struggle with concepts that other Species find elementary, that part was all real, but the ancients did not need me to be good at those things. They needed me to be human. What are you going to do? Valera asked quietly. Lucas could feel the weapons ready to fire, could sense their eagerness to defend, to protect, to fulfill the purpose for which they had been created, the Vorlith. Ships hung in orbit waiting, one word from him and the sky would light up with destruction, one command and he could prove that humanity was indeed worthy of the trust the ancients had placed in them. Instead he spoke again to the Vorlith. You came here expecting to find the galaxy undefended, ready for harvest. You find instead that the ancients prepared for your return. But I have a question for you. Why did you leave 5,000 years ago? What made you stop your conquest and disappear? The Vorlith voice responded, and for the first time it sounded almost thoughtful. We left because the ancients showed us that there were fates worse than defeat. They showed us what we would become if we continued on our path. They made us understand that a galaxy conquered is a galaxy dead, and we did not wish to rule over corpses. We departed to evolve, to grow beyond our nature as destroyers. We return now to see if the current civilizations have learned that same lesson. Lucas understood then this was not an attack. This was a test. The Vorlith had not come to destroy. They had come to see if the galaxy had become worthy of existence, or if it had fallen back into the same patterns of conquest and domination that had nearly destroyed everything before. The weapons you sense, Lucas said, are capable of destroying your fleet. The ancients left us the power to do that, but they also left us with a choice. They taught humanity that strength without wisdom is just tyranny with better weapons. So here is my answer. Depart in peace. Return to your evolution and know that if you ever truly threaten the galaxy again, we will be ready, but also know that we do not wish to use these weapons. We would rather find another way. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Then the Vorlith fleet began to withdraw, their ships shimmering as they prepared to jump back into hyperspace. The Vorlith voice spoke. One last time, the ancients chose well. Humanity may yet prove to be the most interesting species in the galaxy. We will watch your development with great interest. Lucas Barrett of Earth, may we meet again when you have truly come into your inheritance. Then they were gone, vanishing as quickly as they had appeared. Lucas felt the weapon systems powering down, returning to their slumber. The light faded from his hands, and he stumbled, suddenly exhausted. Valera caught him, surprisingly strong for her slender frame. What just happened? Fellows asked, his mandibles hanging slack in shock. Valera helped Lucas to a chair. What happened is that we discovered the true purpose of the academy. We thought we were training the brightest minds in the galaxy, but this institution was built on this location for a different reason entirely. It was built as a beacon, a place where the sentinel systems would encounter genetic material from all the different species of the galaxy, a place where they could wait for the inheritors to arrive. And the tests, Lucas asked weakly. All the examinations I failed were completely irrelevant, Valera said, and for the first time Lucas saw her smile. The ancients did not care if you could calculate quantum entanglement or design a fusion reactor. They cared that you were human, that you carried within you the genetic markers they had coded into Your species 5,000 years ago. So I really am terrible at all those. Subject, Lucas said, and found himself laughing despite everything, all this time. I thought I was just not trying hard enough. Fellows approached slowly, his 4 eyes fixed on Lucas with a new expression. Respect. On behalf of the faculty, I must apologize. We judged you by standards that were never meant to apply to you. We failed to see the larger picture. You did not know, Lucas said. I did not know. How could any of us have known? Over the next few hours, as the Academy recovered from the shock and emergency protocols were gradually lifted, the news of what had happened spread throughout the galaxy. Lucas Barrett, the human who had failed every test, had activated ancient super weapons and convinced the Vorlith to withdraw peacefully. The story was too impossible to believe, except that every sensor, every recording, and every witness confirmed it. Lucas's communicator exploded with messages from his father, pride evident in every word; from his mother, relief that he was safe; from human governments, congratulating him on his achievement; from alien worlds, some thanking him, others demanding to know what other secrets Earth might be hiding. But the message that meant the most came from Caller, the Trollian student who had mocked him so mercilessly. It was brief and simple. I was wrong about you. I am sorry. Lucas stood on the balcony outside the Hedham's office, looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Vorlith were watching humanity, waiting to see what they would become. And here, on this world, thousands of students were reevaluating everything they thought they knew about intelligence, about worth, about what it meant to be advanced. Thera joined him, her presence quiet and contemplative. What will you do now? She asked. The galactic governments will want to study you too. Understand the genetic markers you carry. The weapons will respond only to human blood, which makes your species the most strategically important in the galaxy. You will have responsibilities, pressures, expectations. Lucas thought about that, about the weight of suddenly being important when he had spent so long being overlooked. I think I will finish my education. I still want to learn, even if I am terrible at tests, and I want to understand what the ancients did to humanity, why they chose us. There must be a reason beyond just genetics. There is, said. I have been researching human history since this afternoon. Your species has an unusual characteristic. When you encounter something you cannot do, something that seems impossible, you do not accept defeat. You simply try different approaches until something works. The ancients must have recognized this quality, this stubborn refusal to accept limitations. Humans call it perseverance, Lucas said, or sometimes too stupid to know when to quit. Thera's laugh was like crystal bells. Perhaps those are the same thing. In any case, you are welcome to remain at the Academy as long as you wish, and I suspect your test scores will improve dramatically now that we understand your unique situation. Actually, Lucas said, I think I would like to keep taking the regular tests. I want to see if I can actually learn this material, not because the ancients program me, but because I choose to. Thera nodded approvingly. Very well, but Lucas, one question: when you activated the weapons, when you spoke to the Vorlith, how did you know what to say? The language was dead for millennia. Lucas considered this. Honestly, I did not know. It just came to me like remembering something I had forgotten. Maybe that is what the ancients gave us. Not just the ability to use their weapons, but the wisdom to know when not to use them. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the moons rise over the academy. Lucas thought about the journey that had brought him here, all the failures and frustrations, all the mockery and doubt. None of it had been wasted. Every failed test had taught him humility. Every laugh at his expense had taught him resilience. Every moment of struggling with concepts he could not grasp had prepared him for this moment when he needed to make the right choice under impossible pressure. A week later, Lucas sat in the same classroom where he had failed so many tests. The other students watched him differently now, with curiosity instead of contempt, with wonder instead of mockery. Instructor Fellows distributed the examination, his mandibles clicking in a pattern Lucas now recognized as nervousness. This test covers advanced field theory. Fellows announced, "You have 2 hours. You may begin." Lucas looked down at the questions. They were just as incomprehensible as they had always been, filled with symbols and concepts that swam in his vision like angry fish. He sighed, picked up his stylus, and began to work through them, slowly, methodically, knowing he would probably fail, but that was okay because he had learned that failure was not the end of the story. It was just part of being human, and being human, it turned out, was exactly what the galaxy needed. 3 months passed, and life at the academy found a new normal. Lucas continued to struggle academically, though he no longer ranked absolute last. A Calaxian student with a learning disability had joined and was having an even harder time than Lucas. They studied together, sometimes commiserating over equations that refused to make sense. The change in how others treated Lucas was subtle but profound. Students who had once mocked him now greeted him in hallways. Professors who had been dismissive now showed patience when he asked questions. It was not hero worship, which would have been uncomfortable, but rather kind of thoughtful respect, as if everyone was reconsidering what they thought they knew about intelligence and worth. Lucas found himself becoming something unexpected, a mentor to struggling students. They sought him out in the library, in the cafeteria, in quiet corners of the campus. Students who were failing, who felt inadequate, who wondered if they belonged at the academy. He told them the same thing every time, that failure was not the end, that persistence mattered more than natural ability, that everyone learned differently, and that was acceptable. Young shulker named Christos, whose crystalline structure made certain types of mathematics nearly impossible for her to process, spend hours with Lucas working through problems. She would grow frustrated, her internal light flickering with distress, ready to give up. Lucas would remind her of his own struggles, of the hundreds of tests he had failed, of how he kept trying anyway. One evening, after Christos finally solved a problem that had plagued her for weeks, she turned to Lucas with wonder in her multifaceted eyes. "How did you endure it?" she asked. "The constant failure, the mockery, the feeling that you did not belong. How did you keep coming back day after day?" Lucas thought about that question carefully, because giving up would have meant accepting that they were right about me, that humans were inferior, that I was defective, that my father had been wrong to believe in me. I could not let that be the end of my story, so I kept trying, not because I thought I would eventually succeed, but because trying was the only choice I could live with. Christos absorbed this, her internal light pulsing thoughtfully. That is very human of you, Lucas smiled. I suppose it is, and maybe that is not such a bad thing. The weapons beneath the academy remained dormant, waiting. Valera had established a research team to study them, though they required Lucas's presence to access even the basic systems. He spent several hours each week in the vault, allowing scientists from a dozen species to scan, measure, and analyze the ancient technology. They learned remarkably little. The weapons kept their secrets, responding only to Lucas and to the genetic markers coded into human DNA. The research sessions were fascinating. In their own way, Lucas would place his hand on various panels, activating systems that had slept for millennia. The scientist would record energy signatures, analyze molecular structures, attempt to understand the fundamental principles underlying the technology. It was far beyond anything current galactic science could explain. Dr. Nemes, a Vaxian physicist who had spent 40 years studying ancient civilization, worked with Lucas most frequently. She was patient and methodical, asking Lucas to describe what he felt when he activated different systems, what impressions came to him, whether the weapons communicated in any way he could articulate. It is like remembering something you never learned. Lucas tried to explain one day, when I touch the controls, I know what they do, but I cannot explain how I know. It is instinctive, genetic, something my ancestors were programmed to understand, even if my conscious mind does not. Dr. Nimeris clicked her mandibles thoughtfully. The ancients essentially encoded an entire weapons manual into human DNA. The elegance of that solution is extraordinary. No need for written instructions that could be lost or corrupted. The knowledge passes from generation to generation, waiting to be activated when needed. But why humans? Lucas asked. Why not choose a species that was already advanced, already space faring? Why pick beings who were barely past the hunter-gatherer stage when the ancients visited Earth? Dr. Nimeris considered this question for a long moment before answering. Perhaps that was precisely the point. Advanced civilizations often become rigid in their thinking, convinced that their way is the only way. Primitive species are more adaptable, more open to different possibilities. The ancients may have chosen humanity precisely because you had not yet developed the biases that come with technological advancement. Earth had sent envoys, of course, demanding access, wanting to understand. Lucas's father arrived as part of the diplomatic delegation, and they had a long conversation in Lucas's small dormitory room. I am proud of you, Marcus Barrett said, and Lucas could see that he meant it, not because you activated some ancient weapons, but because you kept trying when everything seemed hopeless. That is what makes you human, son. That is what makes us all human. Did you know? Lucas asked. When you recommended me for the academy, did you know about the ancients and what they had done to humanity? Marcus shook his head. I knew nothing about ancient weapons or genetic markers. I recommended you because I saw potential in you that you did not see in yourself. You are my son, and I know that when the world says you cannot do something, you find a way to prove it wrong. I just did not expect the stakes to be quite so high. They laughed together, and Lucas felt a weight he had not known he was carrying lift from his shoulders. His father's approval was not contingent on his test scores or his sudden importance. To galactic security, it had been there all along, waiting for Lucas to accept it. As spring arrived on the Academy world, bringing storms that painted the sky in shades of violet and gold, Lucas received an unexpected visitor. Vorlith's ship appeared in orbit alone and transmitting peaceful intentions. Its ambassador requested permission to speak with Lucas Barrett. They met in the same office where Lucas had first activated the weapons. The Vorlith ambassador was tall and angular with skin that seemed to shift between solid matter and something else, something that existed in dimensions Lucas could not quite perceive. Its voice resonated not from a mouth but from the air itself. Lucas Barrett, it said, we have been observing your development, both yours personally and humanity's as a species. Should I be concerned? Lucas asked, trying to keep his voice steady. On the contrary, the ambassador replied, we are impressed. Since the incident 3 months ago, humanity has made remarkable decisions. You could have leveraged your control of the weapons to demand power, territory, resources. Instead, you have shared access to the basic defense systems with all council species and refused compensation. You continue to attend classes you struggle with rather than resting on your achievement. These are the actions of a species that understands the burden of power. We had good teachers, Lucas said. The ancients left us more than just weapons. They left us a responsibility. Indeed, the ambassador said, which is why I am here to offer you a gift. The Vorlith possess knowledge that could help you understand the academic subjects you struggle with. We could enhance your cognitive abilities, allow you to pass those tests that frustrate you. Would you like this? Lucas was tempted. He imagined understanding quantum mechanics, grasping multidimensional geometry, finally succeeding instead of failing. But something made him pause. Why would you offer this? He asked, to see what you would choose. The ambassador replied, the ancients believed humanity's value lay not in what you are now, but in the journey of what you might become. We wish to see if you understand that. Then I must decline. Lucas said, if I accept artificial enhancement, I rob myself of the opportunity to learn naturally, to struggle and grow, and eventually understand through my own effort. The ancients did not choose humanity because we were already perfect. They chose us because we are willing to work toward perfection even if we never achieve it. The Vorlith ambassador made a sound that might have been approval. The ancients chose very well indeed. Farewell, Lucas Barrett. May we meet again when your species has fully matured. As the Vorlith ship departed, Valera entered the office. She had been listening from her private chamber. You continued to surprise me, she said. Most beings would have accepted that offer without hesitation. Most beings did not spend 2 years being mocked for their failures. Lucas replied, I have learned that the struggle has value. If I skip the struggle, I lose the lesson. That is profound wisdom for one so young. Valora observed. Lucas smiled. I failed enough tests to learn something eventually. The semester continued, and Lucas's test scores improved marginally. He moved from failing 94% of examinations to failing only 87%. It was progress, even if it was slower than continental drift. His tutors learned to work with his unique learning style, and he learned not to give up quite so easily when equations refused to cooperate. Caller became an unlikely friend, her earlier mockery replaced with genuine respect. She helped him study, explaining concepts in ways that sometimes clicked. Where the textbooks failed, they spent long evenings in the library, surrounded by holographic displays and increasingly empty cups of caffeinated beverages from various worlds. I still do not understand how you can be so important and yet so terrible at basic physics, Caloris said one night, her 3 eyes reflecting the glow of the equations. Floating between them, I contain multitudes, Lucas replied, a quote from an ancient human poet. That makes no sense, Caloris said. Welcome to humanity, Lucas said with a grin. As the year drew to a close, the Academy held its traditional awards ceremony. Students were recognized for academic excellence, for research achievements, for athletic accomplishments. Lucas attended, expecting to watch from the audience as others received accolades he would never earn. Then headmaster Valera called his name, Lucas Barrett. She announced, "Please come forward." Confused, Lucas made his way to the stage. Valera stood at the podium, her black eyes fixed on him with an expression he could not read. Lucas Barrett's academic record remains among the worst in Academy history, she said. And Lucas felt his face flush as the audience shifted uncomfortably. He has failed more tests than some students have taken. His understanding of basic principles continues to be questionable at best, and yet she continued, her voice growing stronger. Lucas Barrett has taught this institution something far more valuable than any academic achievement. He has reminded us that intelligence comes in many forms, that worth cannot be measured by examination scores alone, and that sometimes the greatest contributions come from the most unlikely sources. For this reason, the faculty has created a new award, the Award for Perseverance in the Face of Impossible Odds. Lucas Barrett, you are its first recipient. The applause started slowly, then grew, then became thunderous. Lucas stood on the stage, holding a crystal trophy that represented not his success but his willingness to keep trying despite constant failure. Tears ran down his face, and he did not bother to hide them. Later, as the celebration continued around him, Lucas found a quiet corner and called his father. "I got an award," he said when Marcus answered. "I know," his father replied. "I was watching the live stream. I am proud of you, son. It is an award for being bad at things," Lucas said, but he was smiling. "It is an award for being too stubborn to quit," Marcus corrected. "That is the most human thing of all." When the call ended, Lucas looked out at the Academy, at the stars beyond, at the universe full of wonders and mysteries. He barely understood. Somewhere beneath his feet, ancient weapons slept, waiting for the day they might be needed again. Somewhere in deep space, the Vorlith watched and evaluated humanity's progress, and here in this moment, Lucas was simply a student who had failed another test that day but would try again tomorrow. 2 years later, Lucas graduated from the Academy. His final ranking was 230, first out of 240 students. He received his diploma with a mixture of relief and pride, knowing he had earned it through sheer stubborn determination rather than natural aptitude. The ceremony ended, and Lucas prepared to return to Earth to begin the next chapter of his life. He had offers from various organizations, some wanting to study his genetic markers, others hoping to use his connection to the ancient weapons for political leverage. He had declined them all. Instead, he had accepted a position as a junior diplomatic liaison, following in his father's footsteps in his own way. On his last day at the academy, Lucas visited the vault one final time. The weapons recognized his presence, the walls glowing softly in greeting. He placed his hand on the crystallized metal, feeling the vast power sleeping beneath. "Thank you," he said quietly, to the ancients who had left this legacy, to the weapons that had trusted him with their power, to the universe that had given humanity this impossible responsibility. I do not know if we will ever be worthy of what you gave us, but I promise we will keep trying. Light pulsed once, as if acknowledgement, then faded. Lucas walked out of the academy for the last time, carrying a diploma that represented years of struggle and a legacy that represented millennia of preparation. Behind him, the ancient weapons returned to their vigil, waiting patiently for the day when humanity would need them again. And ahead of him lay the stars, full of challenges he did not yet understand and problems he would undoubtedly fail to solve on the first attempt. But that was fine. He was human after all. He would just keep trying until he got it right. The galaxy would learn that lesson, too. In time, humanity was not the smartest species, not the strongest, not the most advanced, but they were the species that refused to accept defeat, that learned from failure, that kept getting back up, no matter how many times they were knocked down. The ancients had bet the future of the galaxy on that one characteristic, and as Lucas Barrett stepped onto the transport that would take him home to Earth, he was determined to prove that their bet had been a good one. 10 years passed, and Lucas served as Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council. His test scores at the Academy were occasionally mentioned, usually as a humorous footnote in his biography. His activation of the Sentinel systems was better remembered, though even that it faded somewhat from the constant galactic news cycle. But what truly defined Lucas's career was what came after. He became known as the ambassador who always found another way, who refused to accept that conflicts could not be resolved, who met every diplomatic dead and with another attempt from a different angle when the Triaxian disputes threatened to erupt into war. Lucas spent 6 months shuttling between worlds, trying solution after solution until finally finding common ground. When the crystalline concordat seemed ready to collapse, Lucas organized talks that everyone said would fail, tried approaches that had never worked before, and somehow brought the fractured alliance back together. He was not the most eloquent diplomat, not the most politically savvy, not the one with the best understanding of multidimensional treaty law, but he was the one who did not give up, and in galactic politics that turned out to matter more than anyone had expected. One evening, as Lucas worked late in his office on Earth, reviewing a particularly thorny trade agreement that seemed designed to give him headaches, he received a transmission. The source was listed as unknown, the encryption pattern unlike anything in current use. When he opened it, he saw the Vorlith ambassador, the same one who had visited him at the Academy a decade earlier. "Lucas Barrett," the ambassador said, "we have completed our evaluation." Lucas felt a chill run down his spine. Evaluation of what? Of humanity. Of whether your species was worthy of the trust the ancients placed in you. The Vorlith have been watching your development for 10 years, analyzing your choices, measuring your progress, and Lucas asked, his mouth dry, and we have determined that the ancients were correct. Humanity is indeed the species they hoped you would become. You are not the most powerful civilization in the galaxy, nor the most advanced, but you possess a quality that transcends those measurements. You refuse to accept that problems cannot be solved, that conflicts cannot be resolved, that failure is final. This makes you uniquely suited to the role the ancients envisioned. What role is that? Lucas asked. Guardians, the ambassador replied, not through force of arms, though you have access to the weapons for that purpose, but guardians through persistence, through the stubborn belief that there must be a better way. The galaxy needs that voice, Lucas Barrett. It needs species who fail and try again, who learn from mistakes, who do not give up. The transmission ended, and Lucas sat in his office thinking about the journey that had brought him here, from the student who could not pass basic examinations to the ambassador who had helped prevent 3 wars and resolve a dozen major disputes, not through brilliance, not through superior understanding, but through sheer refusal to accept defeat. His communicator chimed. Another crisis, another problem that seemed unsolvable. Lucas read the brief, saw the complexity, understood about half of the political nuances, and none of the technical specifications. He smiled, opened a new file, and started working on the first of what would probably be many failed solutions. Because that was what humans did. They failed, they learned, they tried again. And sometimes, if they kept trying long enough, they changed the galaxy. Decades later, when Lucas was an old man, his hair white and his face lined with the years of service, he returned to the academy. They had invited him to speak at the graduation ceremony, to address new generation of students about to enter the galaxy. He stood on the same stage where he had once received an award for perseverance and looked out at the young faces, dozens of species represented, all of them smarter than he had ever been. I was the worst student in academy history, he began, and that got their attention. I failed 94% of my examinations. I struggled with concepts that children master easily, and for a long time I believed that made me worthless. He paused, remembering that young man who had sat in remedial classes, drowning in material he could not comprehend. But I learned something important during my time here and in the years since. Intelligence is not the only measure of worth. Determination matters, resilience matters, the willingness to fail and try again matters. The ancients understood this. When they chose humanity to guard their weapons, they did not choose us because we were already perfect. They chose us because we were willing to work toward perfection, even knowing we might never achieve it. Lucas looked at the graduates, seeing hope and fear and determination in their expressions. You are about to enter a galaxy that will test you in ways you cannot imagine. Some of you will succeed brilliantly on your first attempts. Others, like me, will fail repeatedly before finding your path. Both journeys have value. Both are necessary. The galaxy needs brilliant minds to solve complex problems, but it also needs stubborn hearts to keep trying when the brilliant minds give up. He held up his diploma, the one he had earned despite ranking 230, first out of 240. Student, this represents years of failure, he said, and it is one of my most prized possessions because it proves that I did not quit, that I kept trying even when everything seemed hopeless, that I learned that failure is not the opposite of success, it is part of success. The graduates applauded and Lucas saw understanding in their eyes. Not all of them would struggle as he had, but all of them would face challenges, all of them would encounter moments when they wanted to give up, and maybe, just maybe, they would remember the human who failed every test and changed the galaxy. Anyway, after the ceremony, Lucas visited the vault one last time. The weapon still slept beneath the academy, patient and eternal. He placed his aged hand on the crystallized metal, and it glowed in recognition. Thank you for choosing us, he whispered to the ancients who had set this all in motion 5,000 years ago. We are still learning, we still fail more than we succeed, but we are trying, we will always keep trying. Light pulsed softly, warmly, and Lucas could have sworn he felt approval in that glow, not approval for what humanity had accomplished, but approval for their willingness to keep working towards something better. Lucas died peacefully at the age of 87, surrounded by family and friends from 100 worlds. The galactic news networks ran tributes, highlighting his diplomatic achievements, his role in preventing war, his contributions to interspecies understanding. But the story that was told most often, the one that resonated across the galaxy, was simpler. It was the story of a young human who failed every test, who was mocked and dismissed, who persevered anyway and changed everything. Children of every species learned about Lucas Barrett, not as a hero who activated ancient weapons, though he had done that, not as a brilliant diplomat, though he had become that, but as someone who proved that worth cannot be measured by tests alone, that failure is not final, that determination can triumph over natural ability. The Academy erected a statue, his honor, placing it at the entrance, where every student would see it on their first day. The plaque beneath reads simply, Lucas Barrett, worst student, best example, and beneath the Academy, the weapons continued their eternal vigil, waiting for the next crisis, secure in the knowledge that they had chosen their guardians well. Humanity would never be the smartest species, the most advanced civilization, the most naturally gifted beings in the galaxy, but they would be the ones who refused to quit, and in a universe full of challenges that seemed impossible, that was exactly what was needed. Centuries after Lucas's death, the Galactic Council established the Barrett Prize, awarded annually to individuals or species who demonstrated extraordinary perseverance in the face of adversity. The winners rarely possessed superior intelligence or resources. They were simply the ones who kept trying when all logic said they should stop. The first Barrett Prize was awarded to a young Morvani scientist who conducted 3,000 failed experiments before developing a cure for a plague that had ravaged her world. When asked why she continued after so many failures, she said she had read about a human named Lucas Barrett, and if he could persist for years at an academy where he did not belong, she could persist in a laboratory where she did. The second prize went to a Tralaxian peace negotiator who spent a decade working on a conflict that everyone said was unsolvable, trying approach after approach until finally achieving a lasting treaty. He cited Lucas's diplomatic career as his inspiration, the example of someone who refused to accept that problems had no solutions. The third prize was awarded to a human child, one of Lucas's great-grandchildren who struggled with the same learning difficulties her ancestor had faced, but who graduated at the top of her class anyway through sheer stubborn determination. When she accepted the prize, she said she had grown up hearing stories about Lucas, about how he failed and tried again, and those stories had taught her that failure was nothing to be ashamed of. The galaxy slowly began to understand what the ancients had known 5,000 years earlier. Humanity's greatest strength was not their intelligence or their technology or their physical capabilities. It was their fundamental, almost absurd refusal to accept defeat. When faced with impossible odds, humans did not calculate the probability of success and give up when it was too low. They just kept trying different approaches until something worked. This quality spread through galactic culture like a benevolent virus. Species that had previously given up on seemingly unsolvable problems began to try again. Civilizations that had accepted certain limitations began to question whether those limitations were truly absolute. The entire galactic community became just a little more human in their thinking, a little more willing to fail and learn and try again. And through it all, the Sentinel system slept beneath the Academy, waiting patiently. They had been activated exactly once in 5,000 years, when Lucas Barrett's blood touched their crystallized metal and woke them to defend against the Vorlith. They had not needed to fire a single shot, because Lucas had found another way, a better way, a way that honored the intent of the ancients who had created them. The weapons understood this in whatever way ancient machines could understand. They had been designed not just to destroy threats, but to enable the possibility of finding alternatives to destruction. Lucas had proven that humanity understood that purpose. The weapons could wait 5,000 more years if needed, secure in the knowledge that their guardians would only wake them as a last resort and would always seek another solution first. On Earth, in a small museum dedicated to Lucas Barrett's life, a single item stood in a place of honor. It was not the crystal trophy he had received for perseverance. It was not his diplomatic credentials or the numerous awards he had accumulated over his career. It was his academy transcript showing test score after test score and harsh red failures stretching across years of study. Beneath it, a plaque read, "He failed almost every examination. He changed the entire galaxy." Never let anyone tell you that test scores define your worth. Thousands of visitors came to see that transcript each year. Many were students struggling with their own academic challenges, looking for hope that failure was not the end of their story. Others were scientists, diplomats, explorers, people facing seemingly impossible challenges, who needed to remember that persistence had value. They all came seeking the same message, the one that Lucas Barrett had lived and that the ancients had believed when they chose humanity, that failure is not weakness, that trying again is not futile, that the universe does not care about your test scores, only about your willingness to keep working towards something better. And in the vast darkness between stars, in dimensions that most species could barely perceive, the ancients themselves watched. They had been gone from the physical universe for millennia, evolved into beings of pure energy and thought. But they still maintained interest in the galaxy they had once protected. They saw humanity spreading through the stars not as conquerors but as persistent problem solvers. They saw other species learning from humanity's example, becoming more resilient, more determined, more willing to try again. After failure, they saw a galaxy slowly transforming from a place of rigid hierarchies and accepted limitations into something more dynamic, more hopeful, and they were satisfied. Their plan set in motion 5,000 years ago when they had visited a primitive world called Earth and coded instructions into the DNA of an insignificant species had worked better than they had dared hope. Humanity had not become the dominant species. They had become something more important. They had become the species that reminded everyone else why giving up was never the answer. The Vorlith, too, watched humanity's progress. They had returned to test whether the galaxy was worth preserving, and they had found their answer in a young human who chose diplomacy over destruction, persistence over power. They spread word through dimensions most beings could not access, telling others of their kind that this galaxy was worth leaving alone, that something interesting was happening here, that perhaps the next cycle of galactic evolution would produce something unprecedented, all because of a species that failed constantly but refused to accept failure as final. In the end, that was humanity's true contribution to the galaxy, not the activation of ancient weapons, though that had been important, not the diplomatic achievements or the scientific discoveries or the cultural exchanges, but the simple, stubborn insistence that problems had solutions. If you just kept looking for them, that obstacles could be overcome if you just tried enough different approaches, that failure was just a temporary setback on the path to eventual success. The ancients had chosen humanity not despite their flaws but because of them, because a species that had to struggle for every achievement understood the value of that achievement in a way that naturally gifted species never could, because beings who failed constantly developed a relationship with failure that transformed it from an ending into a learning opportunity. Lucas Barrett had exemplified this quality, had lived it so thoroughly that his life became a lesson for the entire galaxy, the worst student who became the best teacher, not through what he said but through how he lived. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also, leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one, and I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug and see you in the next.